Another week brings another wave of threat actors, malicious payloads, and compromised systems. In today's episode, we'll be diving into some of the latest intelligence being shared by our incredible community over in the LimaCharlie Slack channel. A huge shout out to everyone who contributes. It's because of your insights that we can keep these discussions going. If you find these intel briefings useful and you're not already part of our Slack community, you're missing out. There's a constant flow of interesting conversations and valuable information being shared there in real time, usually more than we can cover in a single episode. You can join the conversation at slack.limacharlie.io. And as always, I'm joined by the one and only Matt Bromley. Matt, how's it going today?
There he is, Chris. What's going on, sir? I'm doing well. It is the first recording session in February. And I got to say, I know there was a while where all I talked about was the weather on my little intro here. And I'm back at it because here in North Texas, yesterday we broke the 80s. And It was February, early February. So I'm all for it. I'm doing great right now. I'm happy. I'm loving it. I apologize. I know there are some folks who are battling snowstorms right now, who are dealing with all sorts of things, but that person is not me, and I'm happy for it. So I'm doing great. I'm loving it. Looking forward to today's chat.
Yeah, up here in the Great White North, we've got about 30 centimeters of snow, which is 1 foot in freedom units.
Freedom units. I like
That's
that.
right,
You better
yeah.
be careful, sir. We might call that the American measurement system soon. You never know what's going to happen. There's all sorts of renaming and geopolitical things happening. Maybe I should stop there.
Yeah, we should probably stop there. But I will
Yep.
mention, I had a CTO previously who was from Chicago, really talented guy. Shout out to Chuck Clark. And he used to say that there's two types of countries in the world, the ones that use metric units and the ones that have been to the moon. So I will have to give you guys that one.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah.
I think I've heard also there's two types of countries. There's folks who use the metric system, and then there's folks who do it wrong. And the same can allegedly be applied to driving, but it kind of goes the other way, I think. But there's too much disparity there. Anyways, I'm not sure the linkage, but yeah.
It's fun to laugh at our differences and know that we're very good friends across this long shared border that we have. So
yes. And that being said, for everyone else who's listening, who's out there, I actually wanted to make a little bit of a call to action for everyone. Usually we do this at the end of the episode to see who made it, but I'm going to do it at the beginning, and I'm going to say on behalf of Chris and myself, please do find a way to get in touch with us and let us know where you're listening from. We're always excited to see where folks are from, and you never know. Chris loves sending swag packs out to certain places. While there's a functioning mail service, I should add. So with that said, let us know where you're listening from. We'd love to hear that.
Yes. Okay, well, on to the good stuff. A recent phishing campaign has been targeting high-profile X accounts, aka Twitter, exploiting a one-click technique to hijack profiles. According to security researchers, attackers are using malicious links that require only a single click to compromise an account, bypassing traditional multi-step phishing methods. These links are often disguised as urgent security alerts or notifications related to account verification. Once clicked, they grant attackers access to authentication tokens, allowing them to take over accounts without needing passwords or MFA codes. The campaign has affected several prominent accounts, including those belonging to cybersecurity professionals and tech influencers. That's a little bit scary.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
And in that sense, not everybody left X or Twitter, I guess, when they all said they were going to. But nonetheless, I find this one to be a little interesting, primarily because it's a single click that's kind of involved in this one, right? And it is lauded as, or kind of touted as, the single click, one-click phishing campaign, which I find to be a little interesting. The other one, I think, Chris, the other part about this that I found kind of interesting as well, hat tip over to the folks at Sentinel Labs for providing and kind of posting this to us as well, is that some of the folks who they went after, some of the targets of this, if you will, to name a few here, and Chris, you might dig into this part a little bit deeper, but it goes into, individual and organizational accounts, political figures, international journalists, technology organizations. Of course, cryptocurrency organizations got in there. And then owners of valuable short usernames. That's the one that kind of made me pause for just a moment, primarily because I know in a lot of cases, like having a good handle that might already be taken is actually kind of a good claim to fame to have, right? And you got to think about that list. Everything makes sense when you think about a target victim perspective, right? A leading prominent figure, someone who might be able to reach the masses, and then like a handle I really want. So I feel like sometimes it can become a very personal target list when you're like, hey guys, while we're at it, can we loop in that thing that I want as well. And then if the phishing campaign works great, I can have that on the side too, but nonetheless, always an interesting thing to watch out for. And then something else just to mention to the attackers. I know Chris is going to go through some of the details of how the attack actually works here, but like the screenshots inside of the blog post, there's IP addresses tied directly to Russia. There's Android devices called out. I mean, let's just, come on, guys, a little OPSEC and what you do might go a step further than you getting caught in the future. But I don't know what the retribution is for stolen Twitter accounts, but who knows? We'll see. But Chris, I think you got some insight on how this attack actually happened.
Yeah, so researchers note that the attackers are likely leveraging session hijacking techniques, exploiting vulnerabilities in how authentication tokens are managed. By tricking users into clicking these malicious links, attackers can capture session cookies, which they then use to impersonate the victim. This method is particularly effective because it avoids detection by traditional phishing filters that look for credential theft. Security experts recommend that users monitor their active sessions, revoke any suspicious logins, and enable hardware-based authentication where possible. X has yet to release a detailed statement on how it is addressing these attacks, but affected users are encouraged to report incidents and reset their authentication tokens. This campaign highlights the ongoing evolution of phishing tactics and the need for stronger security measures beyond just MFA. And I will say this is another reminder to trust but verify. When somebody hits you up with something that sounds like a bit of a strange request from a trusted channel, maybe ping them on another channel just to confirm that it's actually them, because you never know.
Yeah, absolutely. And furthermore, as always, the target list and the victims in this attack usually include folks who there might be some who are very technical, but some who are not. You got to think, Chris, an organizational X account might be managed by a team of folks over in the marketing department. And that's not a bad thing. It's just to show they're not technically aware. They're not going to double check and verify all these things. It might be a mobile notification someone gets in the middle of the night that says, hey, you need to verify your password. And they're like, I got a bunch of tweets scheduled. Let me, get this thing settled. And next thing you know, they've fallen victim to an account like this. So there's certainly plenty of situations where adversaries can find success with these types of attacks, despite the fact that for some of us, we may hear about them and be like, really? That's all it took? But remember, they're not always going after the most technically acumen people, because that's not their job to be that.
Mm-hmm. And Matt makes a good point. If you're doing security inside of an organization with a large marketing team or even a small marketing team, it might be worth sort of forwarding them an article like this with a couple tips on how to stay safe.
Always remember, your users are your first and last line of defense, especially when you get to kind of, I'm going to call it, maybe single or double click social media, things like this, because this is not like I'm going to interrupt a supply chain through an exploit. This is, I'm going to utilize someone's public platform to, say a thing, echo a sentiment, steal an account, or whatever it might be. A lot of times, Chris, I feel like these types of attacks are also like the coin miners of the world, because a lot of times it's like, someone found a novel way to compromise X accounts. And what do they do with that? They use it to pump their stupid crypto scam. And I'm like, if you're sitting on this type of thing for X or Twitter or whatever, like, yeah, I feel like you could do so much more with it. I'm glad they don't.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, why is it always like Bitcoin giveaways and stuff like that? Like, come on, give us something meatier here.
Yeah. Yeah. Not a lot of creativity on that side of the
right.
The
it's
line,
always
right?
like, I got the most amazing Linux exploit. How do I take advantage of it? Deploy a crypto miner. Really? Like, come on, guys, be a little more imaginative.
All right. So up next, North Korean state-sponsored hackers have been observed deploying a new malware strain called Ferret Stealer, targeting organizations in various sectors. According to cybersecurity researchers, this info stealer is designed to exfiltrate credentials, browser data, and sensitive files from compromised systems. The campaign, attributed to the Kimsuki group, I'm killing that one, relies on phishing emails containing malicious attachments or links, which, when executed, deliver the malware. Ferret Stealer is particularly concerning because of its ability to evade traditional security measures by disguising itself as legitimate software and using encrypted communications to exfiltrate stolen data. The attackers appear to be focusing on government agencies, research institutions, and policy organizations, indicating a strong cyber-espionage motive. And I just want to say, Ferret Stealer, I think Jen Easterly just recently made a post saying that we got to stop naming these guys cute, fuzzy things and calling them who they are. These are North Korean state-sponsored hackers, not a bunch of fuzzy, cute little animals.
I mean, hey, there's a Python backdoor named Invisible Ferret. There's a JavaScript-based malware known as Beaver Tail. I mean, you never know. There's another piece of malware known as Otter Cookie. I mean, look, Chris, you and I have talked about this before. We don't get to choose the names of some of these threat actors, and that means you and I need to get on here and we need to talk about Frosty Ferret and Friendly Ferret and otters and badgers and beavers and all kinds. I mean, it can go sideways really quickly. I agree with Ms. Easterly. By the way, miss you, but I agree with Ms. Easterly that when you name these things little cuddly cute things, it definitely can make it interesting to read these articles. Number one. However, Chris, I will say I've named a few pieces of malware in my time, and I intentionally chose children's toys as the noun inside of that. The adjective was a color, the noun was a child's toy, and I intentionally, not to like throw too much shade, but I intentionally like didn't want to give them the benefit of being like, dark theft or a credential destroyer or something. I didn't want like a handle you could, or a name you could hear and be like, oh my gosh, that thing's scary. I wanted a handle where you're like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what they're doing here with North Korea. Who knows? But nonetheless, this is an interesting piece of malware. And I think this whole family, this whole campaign, everything that's been involved here is really interesting. Number one, I'd like to kind of give a little bit of a shout out towards the name of this campaign. Ferret Family speaks towards the malware itself. Perhaps more interesting is Sentinel-1 referring to this as the contagious interview campaign. And this is yet again another instance where we are looking at kind of this combined approach of North Korea getting foothold inside of certain targets by going through the job interview process. In some cases, getting their PDF resume opened inside of a target environment. In some cases, actually getting the job. And I think all of this goes towards a much larger campaign. Chris and I have talked about this a couple of times. I think this has come up. I will say we actually had a colleague of ours run into this as well, from a firsthand perspective. I'm going to stop there with that story and just say that it is very prevalent around the security industries, especially right now, where you've got these really interesting setups. These, North Korean threat actors are really going all in on this kind of interview style, getting a job style campaign where it's like, what's the best way to get the secrets to a company? Let them give them to you and stuff. And I think there's an interesting take here, number one, on that. Number two, I think we may have joked the last time we talked about this that like, I can't imagine a worse job than you graduating to become an Intel operative for your country. And then they turn around and say, now go get a job in America. And
you're writing front end code in React for some SaaS company.
Congratulations. Go learn Angular. You're going to get the code base for that crypto company. But nonetheless, I still think this is an interesting one. But to kind of rope back to the ferret side of things, again, there's a whole series of pieces of malware here: Friendly Ferret, Frosty Ferret. I think the really big takeaway here, I know Chris is going to talk about this a little bit more, but this is, I believe, Go-based malware. There's obviously some Python tie-in, there's some JavaScript tie-in, but these are Go-based backdoors. And for anyone who is, interested in kind of like the progression of malware around threat actors and threat actor pools and stuff like that, this is definitely one to pay attention to. I think there's, first off, it's Apple focused, number one. That's not the biggest deal these days. I think we're seeing more of that. But Chris, I know you and I can remember the heyday where it was like, when are we going to see Mac malware? When are we going to see Mac malware? And here it is. All right, you got what you wanted, everyone. So let's go. Number one. Number two, there's a lot of files inside of here. There's a lot of opportunities to kind of dig in and see what happened and dig into what the malware is doing. That also means there's a lot of detection opportunities as well, not just file names, not just hashes, but also behavioral characteristics. And I know this is what I'm going to be spending a little bit of time with. The last little tidbit I'll leave in here, Chris, before I let you talk more about the technical details, is that according to Sentinel Labs, the malware was signed with a valid Apple developer signature and team ID, which actually led to additional pieces of malware being discovered as well. And it just goes to show everything can be a pivoting indicator if you know how to use it. And again, great blog post from this team for bringing this one together.
The researchers have noted that Ferret Stealer is highly modular, allowing attackers to customize its functionality based on the target. Once installed, it harvests saved login credentials, cookies, and system information before sending them to a remote command and control server. The malware can also deploy additional payloads, potentially enabling deeper access into victim networks. Given Kamuski's historical ties to North Korea's intelligence operations, this campaign aligns with previous efforts to gather intelligence on geopolitical and defense-related matters. Security experts recommend implementing strict email filtering, endpoint detection solutions, and regular security awareness training to mitigate the threat. The emergence of Ferret Stealer underscores the continued sophistication of North Korean cyber operations and the need for heightened vigilance against state-sponsored threats. This makes me think, we're talking about the interview process style attacks that these guys are using to get jobs essentially in organizations. And I just saw new Chinese companies' AI video simulators today, and they were showing people on screen that a human couldn't tell were not real, and being controlled by somebody in like a puppet fashion. It was pretty impressive stuff, a little bit scary.
I'm just going to say, we've mentioned this before. I know I've said this in workshops that I've run. I've said this in various webinars and stuff like that. The technology that is making the world super amazing these days is also making the world super amazing for threat actors as well. It's got to be called out, and it's got to be mentioned. Like, threat actors are taking advantage of some of the same stuff, the same technology that's out there. They're acing technical interviews. They're literally being able to show up, not recognizing who it is on the other side of the line. You may think like, oh, am I interviewing the right person? Not really much of a way for you to tell. It's a remote friendly position. The guy does and writes good code, or the girl does and writes good code. And you're like, all right, well, this seems legitimate to me. It's a very different world out there. And I think that makes attacks like this actually possible. I think if you're someone who's not really too familiar with either what you can do with AI or what's happening in the adversarial space right now, and then you hear something like, oh, North Korean threat actor works for a company for 8 months and steals the entire code base or whatever, your initial thought might be, how on earth do you hire a North Korean? And it goes down to, think about all the different steps in that attack, and think of how many people are on a team, a massive global team that you might never even meet, might never even know about. It's definitely possible. And it's certainly, it's also not out of the ordinary for folks to use like temp agencies or, subcontracted work or something like that. There's so many ways for these folks to get in there. What it does, it means we've got to strengthen that interview process, wrap more security controls around it. And this is yet another opportunity, Chris, where I would say the human resources department is your front line of defense here. Security teams, if you're listening, give them some insight, give them some pointers, tell them things to look out for. When they get to those technical interviews, I'm aware they're talking more to the development team and stuff, but HR is that initial screener. As I've mentioned before, it's their job to open files and read people's qualifications. It's their job to read the email that says, oh, hey, sorry, the PDF didn't work. Here's a docx version. Just enable macros. It happens. It happens. Yeah. So teach and educate instead of blaming.
Yeah, that seems to be our theme so far. We talked about educating the marketing team in the first article.
Yes.
Now we're talking about the HR department. So
I like this. This tone is better than the last episode.
All right. In AI back on the map here, a new AI-powered malware campaign has been discovered in the Python package index repository involving a set of malicious packages named DeepSeek. Security researchers have identified these packages as part of a sophisticated supply chain attack where attackers use AI-generated code to create and disguise malware more effectively. The DeepSeek packages mimic legitimate Python libraries, tricking developers into downloading them. Once installed, they execute malicious payloads that can exfiltrate sensitive data, steal credentials, and even establish remote access to compromised systems. This discovery highlights the increasing use of AI tools to automate and enhance malware development, making threats harder to detect and analyze. And yeah, I can totally see how this one would spread fast. There's all this hype on social media about DeepSeek's AI model that costs a fraction of what OpenAI's model, and everybody wants to try it. There's an open source version, and so you Google search it. Oh, there's a package. You download it, and you think you're running with the real thing, but you've just infected your machine.
Yeah, and this once again ties into like expected behavior, extremely easy, predictable, expected behavior. When there's a new library out there or a new resource that someone wants to try, what do? They go to their package repository to download it and check it. Do they double check every single one was what they expected? Absolutely not. Chris, I'll say that when DeepSeek first came out, I played around with it a little bit in something like LM Studio or GPT for All. And once I was able to download the thing, which definitely took a minute there, I just want to point and say there was so many different models available. There were so many different options that I wasn't really too sure that I was pulling down the right one. So I had to do a little bit of research and dig into like which one is which, who's the source, who is it coming from? Is this thing malicious? Is it not? And I'm just talking about pulling down the LLM. I'm not talking about interactive code or bringing, code and then running packages on my machine and stuff like that. And I think it's really easy to see how folks could get kind of stuck in that situation. So yet another, maybe, and this is our theme today, yet another reminder for the non-security folks out there is developers, be careful what it is you're pulling down. Be careful, be careful of those seemingly all too good or all too quick packages, because it's not much these days for someone to quickly, and Chris, this is kind of like the rub, right? It's really easy, and I know you're going to talk about this in a second, but it's really easy to say, hey, ChatGPT, I want to create a Python library for DeepSeek. Please give me some initial code, and then just drop in your C2 and boom, you're done and on the way. And it's like you're using AI to create code that then subsequently infiltrates by masking itself as AI. And the web gets deep if we allow the matrix to come to light. So for now, we'll just push it down and say, educate your developers too.
Yeah. So researchers noted that DeepSeek malware uses obfuscation techniques powered by AI-generated code, allowing it to blend in with benign packages. The malicious code remains dormant until triggered by specific conditions, reducing its chances of immediate detection. Once activated, it can harvest API keys, inject backdoors, and execute arbitrary commands. PyPI, I never know how to say that. We'll go with PyPI, has been a frequent target of supply chain attacks, and this incident underscores the need for stricter security measures in open source repositories. Experts advise developers to scrutinize package sources, use automated dependency scanning tools, and limit the use of unverified third-party libraries. The rise of AI-assisted malware like DeepSeek signals a growing shift in cyber threats where adversaries leverage machine learning to enhance the stealth and efficiency of their attacks. And if I remember correctly, the folks over at Datadog did create a Python package tool for
this
exact case. I can't remember what it's called right now, but I'll remember to link it in the show notes. Zach Allen posted about it, and it was very interesting for sure.
I'm trying to remember what it was called as well. Guard Dog, I think.
There we go.
I think it was Guard Dog. Yeah, Guard Dog is one. And then I know you and I have covered another one. I feel like it was a couple months ago. There was another one that we covered as well that allowed for it. But yeah, Guard Dog is one that is I see listed here. And I forget what the other one's called, because I know we've talked about one before.
Let me try the old Google here. Datadog PY. I think that might be it.
That might be it. I'm not sure. I know there's a few really good ones out there.
Yeah, and we'll link it in the show notes. It's definitely worth checking out, especially in light of all the package poisoning, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so researchers have uncovered a multi-layered traffic distribution system operated by a threat group tracked as Tag 124, which has been used to facilitate various cyber attacks at scale. The infrastructure enables attackers to filter and redirect victims based on their geographic location, device type, and browser settings before delivering tailored payloads, including phishing packages, exploit kits, and malware downloads. Tag 124's TDS has been linked to multiple cybercrime operations, serving as a backbone for distributing malicious content across a wide range of industries. The system's extensive user base suggests that it is being leveraged not only by a single threat actor, but also by other cyber criminal groups through underground marketplaces. So this sounds like another one of the cybercrime as a service services.
As always, right? Yeah. Yet another one we've got to deal with and fight with here. Hat tip to the folks over at Recorded Future. I always give a shout out, Chris, whenever there's a great blog post and a good write-up here. And this one was lengthy. Diagrams, indicators, all sorts of great information. Although I will admit, once you scroll down, you realize half the page is a table of network indicators, which nothing wrong with that, but appreciate having them. But put that in an attachment next time, maybe, possibly. But yeah, definitely seeing this one as kind of like that, cybercrime as a service in this case right here. I think another big takeaway that's a little interesting from this one too, Chris, has been, and I know you mentioned this just a moment ago, but the blog post does go into kind of the user base behind this as well. And when you get, if you think about kind of market share or customer exposure, like typical business terms that we would think of, I think threat actors think the exact same way, and when they realize they've got quite a few customers at the table, not just cybercrime, but maybe, different types of threat actors, individuals, maybe even nation or state nexus threat actors, you never know. But I mean, some really, really wide reaching here. And I think sometimes when we talk about different attacks and techniques that happen, sometimes we focus on the threat actor that is actually doing maybe the malware or uploading the C2. But here's an initial access perspective. Here's a way to think about who actually got that piece of malware first installed, or who wrote that fake Chrome update tool that's out there, which, by the way, Chris, is another takeaway of mine from this one here. What a common theme that gets seen all the time. I think we've talked about Chrome updates as a attack vector of some sort, whether it's a browser pop-up, a malicious extension, a drive-by, always some sort of a thing that I think has kind of adversaries have had a lot of success with, because it continues to be a common theme again and again. But nonetheless, an interesting article nonetheless, but I do like kind of zooming in on what's happening from an infrastructure perspective and using that to gain more insight in how adversaries do what they do. And then obviously areas where we can look for detections, areas where we can look to block or implement, mitigating tactics that might bring those success rates down a little bit. And in this case, honestly, like my guidance to everyone here is distribute all this throughout your organization. If you come across a pop-up offering to update Google Chrome, just click out of it. Don't use it. I've yet to find an instance where it's legitimate.
Yeah. So the TDS infrastructure consists of multiple layers, including compromised websites, dedicated servers, and command and control systems that dynamically assign payloads. Researchers have observed the system to be highly modular, allowing attackers to update and customize their campaigns in real time. This adaptability makes Tag 124's operation particularly dangerous, as it can be used to propagate anything from banking Trojans to ransomware. Security experts recommend organizations implement advanced threat intelligence solutions, monitor web traffic for anomalies, and enforce strict filtering of suspicious domains. The discovery of Tag 124's TDS highlights the increasing sophistication of cybercriminal infrastructure and the need for more proactive defense strategies to counter evolving threats. So I feel like a broken record sometimes when we get to the end of these articles. The advice is common, and I don't know how to solve the problems.
Maybe that should tell us. Maybe that should tell us all we need to know, which is that sometimes user education in some of these areas can actually go a really long way. Maybe that's the best thing to focus on and think about here.
Yeah. All right, another Go one for us. A newly discovered malicious Go package is exploiting the Go module system to distribute malware, highlighting a growing trend of software supply chain attacks. Security researchers have identified that attackers are injecting malicious code into seemingly legitimate Go modules, which are then pulled into projects during the dependency resolution process. This technique allows the malware to spread efficiently as developers unknowingly include the compromised package in their software builds. Once integrated, the malicious module can execute various payloads, including credential theft, data exfiltration, and remote access capabilities. The attack demonstrates how adversaries are increasingly targeting programming ecosystems to compromise software at the development stage. And this is tough because, we really got to where we are in software development because of this open source ecosystem, where the one guy in Ohio maintains this project that everybody uses for their DNS resolution or something like that.
Yep.
And there's a lot of trust built into everything we've built, and attackers have figured out that this is a easy place to exploit, and we don't have good tools in place to screen and monitor this sort of software supply chain.
Yeah, and this is another instance too, Chris, where especially reading through this one, I think it I'm not sure if it targets a niche set of developers in this case, or if it's targeting maybe in a more obscure package, right? And let me be clear to everyone, this might just be my ignorance, but one of the ones that was named in this blog post was targeting a typo squat of the legitimate BoltDB database module. And I'm not too familiar with BoltDB. I don't know how widespread the usage of that is, but I feel like in some cases where my head goes to, Chris, is if I hear it's either, and again, I have blinders on, right? If it's a lesser known package that I'm not aware of, I think it's the first time you and I have ever talked about BoltDB, hence my lesser known status, right? But I feel like, are you targeting people who are using BoltDB, or is that just the typo squat you were able to find? Right? Which one is it? Like, is it more opportunistic, or is it more like, no, there's a series of people using BoltDB and we want to go after them? And in that case right there, the threat actor did what pretty much any threat actor would do. The legitimate database module of BoltDB is BoltDB/Bolt. And again, we're using Go, so the GitHub is kind of a requirement in there. And the malicious package was BoltDB-Go/Bolt. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it was published in November 2021. It's been inside of Go's module mirror since that time. If you're a developer who's using BoltDB and you're not really too sure and you're spinning up a new instance, you're not going to pay too much attention towards those two unless you know what you're looking for. And I will note, A lot of times the SDK or the Go SDK for a particular library is the name of that thing -Go. So I can see cases like this where I could easily see developers falling short of it. So once again, Chris, not just detection takeaways, but also user education opportunities. We cannot sit back and ask developers, hey, before you use any library, you need to scan every single part of that package, right? You need to read all the code. I think it's better to maybe focus on like, using other quick determinations, not just age, but also reputation, maybe double checking that repo to make sure it's what you expect it to be, making sure it's not a fork with malicious code. And if you do have any kind of spidey senses or something feels off, take a look at what the changes in the code are. Because remember, the malicious code is there too, right? It's not just like that part's hidden, but the legitimate library is public. The malicious code is there too. So take another look if you need to and be like, wow, this thing, it's outdated, hasn't followed up with the fork, I should say the fork hasn't followed up with the main repository. Something just doesn't seem right here. And those kinds of little baby steps will help you, I think, mitigate at least some of this and maybe lower the success rates.
And I have to say, my brain kind of goes in the direction of when it's niche, I kind of feel like there must be a target, because if it's opportunistic, they generally try and get as wide a net cast as they can. But when it's really niche, you got to wonder. It's kind of like, I remember we covered a SEO poisoning for websites about Bengal cats in Australia. Like there's a very specific type of, they're looking for somebody with that. And I kind of feel the same way with these obscure libraries. And I also think it's worth noting, too, that something that's been around since 2021 might not have had the malicious code in it back then. They might have been planting that to infiltrate and then at some later update start introducing the malicious code. And I think developers are less likely to be scanning code bases or paying attention when it's just a matter of updating from one version to another.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. I think you hit the nail on the head, too, which is it seems too obscure, right? But I'm trying to be careful because once again, you and I may not know the prevalence of BoltDB in the world, and who knows? Maybe it's a database library out there, but I doubt it.
Yeah, I don't write a lot of Go code, so
you never know.
Ignorance on this one.
And I mean, the other thing too is maybe it's an industry target. Maybe to follow up on this, like maybe there's a certain industry or type of application or type of thing that is written in Go and utilizes BoltDB, and there it is.
Yeah. So one key aspect of this attack is the exploitation of Go's module proxy and checksum database, which developers rely on for package integrity. By injecting malware into a module and manipulating its versioning, attackers can bypass security mechanisms that typically verify package authenticity. Researchers warned that such tactics could lead to widespread compromise, particularly for projects that automatically fetch dependencies without thorough validation. To mitigate risks, experts recommend vetting dependencies, using private module registries, and enabling dependency tracking tools that flag suspicious updates. This incident underscores the need for stronger security practices in the Go ecosystem and highlights the broader challenge of securing open source software supply chains. So no surprises here. I think that this is definitely, if you're out there and you're listening and you want to make a difference in the security world, it's like coming up with a way to find poison packages before they make it into production.
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
That's the goal, is to shut these things down before they can come anything big. But all in due time.
Yeah. And I'll send you 3 T-shirts if you can solve that problem.
3. I'll add on a 4th just for fun.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sweet, Matt. Thanks again. It's always a fun time. I thought today was a pretty good conversation.
Likewise, Chris. Thanks again. Always great being here. Love having these chats with you, and I'll see you again next week.
All right, sir. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.